Welcome to Narrative Nights. Today, 3 short horror stories based on folklore. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the narrative nightmare. The Lumberjack. Archie, Harrison, and Richard were 3 old friends who had a love for the great outdoors. They had camped together countless times before and had always relished the thrill of the wilderness. So, when they heard about a remote campsite deep in the woods, they jumped at the chance to explore it. As they set up their tents and unpacked their gear, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. They had heard rumors about a local legend known as the Lumberjack, a notorious serial killer who was said to roam the woods with a bloody axe, stalking his prey. But they brushed the stories aside, thinking it was just a silly tale. Archie was the joker of the group, always cracking jokes and making light of the situation. Harrison was the quiet one, a thoughtful and reserved person who always carried a sense of calm. Richard, on the other hand, was the fearless leader, always taking charge and making sure they were safe. The first night was peaceful, and they slept soundly in their tents. But as they settled in for the second night, they began to hear strange noises coming from the woods. They heard the sound of heavy footsteps and the snapping of twigs, and they knew something was wrong. Despite their fears, they decided to stay put and hope that it was just a wild animal. But the noise grew louder, and the 3 friends grew increasingly uneasy. They could hear something breathing heavily, getting closer and closer to their campsite. Archie tried to lighten the mood by making jokes, but Harrison and Richard were too on edge to laugh. They huddled together, trying to stay as quiet as possible and hoping that the creature would go away. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness, wielding a bloody axe. It was the Lumberjack, the local legend and notorious serial killer who had been stalking the woods for years. The 3 friends were paralyzed with fear as the Lumberjack approached, his eyes gleaming with madness. Harrison was the first to react, trying to make a break for it. But the Lumberjack was too fast, and he caught Harrison with a swift swipe of his axe. Richard tried to fight back, but he was no match for the Lumberjack's strength. He too was quickly dispatched. Archie was the only one left, and he was determined to survive. He grabbed a fallen branch and swung it wildly at the Lumberjack, but it was to no avail. The Lumberjack was relentless, and he soon overpowered Archie. Days turned into weeks, and the families of the missing campers grew worried. They called in search and rescue teams, but they found no trace of Archie, Harrison, or Richard. Weeks later, their bodies were found in a clearing in the woods. They were mutilated beyond recognition, and it was clear that they had suffered a brutal, gruesome death at the hands of the Lumberjack. The authorities launched a massive manhunt for the Lumberjack, but he was never found. To this day, he remains at large, a mysterious and elusive figure who continues to haunt the woods. And so, the story of the Lumberjack lives on, a chilling tale of terror and madness that is whispered around campfires and passed down from generation to generation. The woods remain shrouded in mystery and fear, and campers still fear the sound of heavy footsteps and the snap of twigs in the night. Wendy Lawson. Cole and Aaron were 2 best friends with a passion for exploring abandoned places. They heard about an old, run-down school in the middle of the woods that was said to be haunted. Despite the warnings, they decided to check it out, seeking adventure and thrills. As they entered the school, they were greeted by the smell of decay and the sound of creaking floorboards. The walls were peeling and the windows were boarded up, letting in only a sliver of light. They explored the classrooms and hallways, each one filled with dust and cobwebs. Suddenly, they heard a sound coming from the gymnasium. As they approached, they noticed that the door was slightly ajar. They pushed it open, revealing a large room with a stage at the far end. In the center of the stage was a figure, shrouded in darkness. At that moment, the lights flickered on and off, casting a haunting glow on the figure. As their eyes adjusted, they realized it was a ghostly apparition. It was a young girl with long, flowing hair, dressed in a tattered school uniform. Her eyes were piercing and her mouth was twisted in a scowl. They stood frozen, unable to move as the ghost approached them. The ghost introduced herself as Wendy Lawson, a student who died at the school in a tragic accident. She explained that she was seeking revenge on those who had wronged her, and that Cole and Aaron were next on her list. Wendy was determined to make them pay for the sins of the past, and she was not going to stop until she had achieved her goal. Cole and Aaron were terrified and tried to leave the school, but the doors were locked and the windows wouldn't budge. They were trapped, and Wendy was getting closer with each passing moment. They searched for a way out, but every door they tried was locked tight. As Wendy got closer, Cole and Aaron realized that the only way to escape was to uncover the truth about her death and put her spirit to rest. They delved deeper into the school, piecing together the events that led to her death and trying to figure out who was responsible. As they got closer to the truth, Wendy grew more and more intense, her ghostly form becoming more solid and her anger more palpable. They finally uncovered the dark secret that had caused Wendy's death, and they realized that they were the ones responsible. In a moment of desperation, they tried to apologize and make amends, but it was too late. Wendy was beyond reason, consumed by her need for revenge. She cornered them on the stage, where she had died so many years ago, and prepared to unleash her wrath. In that moment, Cole and Aaron were able to finally put her spirit to rest. They said their apologies and begged for forgiveness, and Wendy's ghostly form dissipated into the air. They were finally able to escape the school, but they never forgot the lesson they had learned about the consequences of their actions. From that day forward, they made a vow to never enter another abandoned building, or to ignore the warnings of others. They learned that sometimes, the things that go bump in the night are best left alone. And they never spoke of Wendy Lawson again, for fear that her spirit might once again be awakened. Mrs. Strought. Kevin Strought was a solitary man who lived deep in the forest, away from civilization. He lived off the land, hunting and fishing for his food and chopping wood for heat. He had no family or friends, and he preferred it that way. Kevin was content with his simple life, but he also had a dark secret that haunted him every day. Kevin's wife had died in a tragic accident several years prior, and he had been unable to cope with the loss. He had been the one driving the car when they were involved in a crash, and he felt responsible for her death. Despite this, he never sought help or tried to move on, instead opting to live a life of solitude and self-punishment. Years passed, and Kevin lived a life of monotony, spending his days working and his nights lost in thought. One night, as he was settling in for bed, he heard a noise coming from outside. He grabbed his rifle and cautiously made his way to the door, ready for anything. As he approached the door, he saw a figure standing on his porch, shrouded in darkness. He thought it was a thief, and he was prepared to defend himself. But as he got closer, he realized that it was not a person, but a ghostly apparition. The ghost was wearing a white dress and had long, flowing hair, and her eyes were fixed on Kevin with an intense gaze. Kevin's heart sank as he realized that it was the ghost of his wife, come to haunt him for not caring enough about her death. She had died because of his carelessness, and he had never tried to make amends or find closure. Now, she was back to make him pay for his neglect. The ghost approached him, her eyes glowing with anger, and Kevin backed away in fear. He tried to run, but she was faster, always one step ahead of him. He finally cornered himself in his bedroom, with the ghost closing in on him. In a moment of desperation, Kevin tried to apologize and make amends, but it was too late. The ghost was beyond reason, consumed by her need for revenge. She possessed his body, taking control of his actions and using him to carry out her wrath. Kevin was unable to resist, and he was forced to watch as the ghost used his body to destroy everything he had built. She burned his cabin to the ground, destroyed his crops, and killed his livestock. Kevin was powerless to stop her, and he was tormented by the knowledge that he was the cause of his own destruction. The ghost continued her rampage, destroying everything in her path and leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. Kevin was trapped inside his own body, unable to escape the ghost's wrath. He watched in horror as she took his life, one piece at a time. In the end, the ghost of Kevin's wife consumed him completely, leaving behind only a broken and destroyed shell of a man. She had gotten her revenge, and Kevin was left to pay the price for his neglect and carelessness. From that day forward, the forest was filled with whispers of a vengeful ghost who roamed the woods, seeking out those who had wronged her. Some say that she can still be seen, wandering the woods with a sad expression, searching for the man who had neglected her in life. And they say that those who cross her path will never return, for she is a ghost who will stop at nothing to get what she wants. This is the end of today's session. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.